Hello, today we're gonna make a mala. I've been asked this a couple times to make an online mala class, but I think I actually decided in the end to offer a free mala class which shows you all the steps, and you can watch it over and over or watch it in different little pieces, and to make your own mala in the traditional way with a tassel. What you need to make a mala is, of course, you need some beads. You need string that I will introduce you later. And you need some material to make a tassel and a couple of tools which I showed you on the way. I think you see what we need on the video already. And what's very helpful to have when you make a mala is a malaboard. That's like a beading board, in this case, specially made for malas. And some of you know that, developed a malaboard a couple of years ago when I did my first mala, and I was really annoyed with these plastic beading boards because they are so flimsy and they attract all the fuzz. And so anyway, what you need to make a mala is not necessarily a malaboard, but it helps a lot. Of course, traditionally, none of the yogis had a malaboard before, and they were basically holding the string maybe with their feet or attaching it to something. What I'm going to show you today is some different versions of malaboards that I developed that can help you if you want. And you don't need to use them, of course. First, I'm going to show you a couple of different malaboards that have different sizes. As you can see, this is the smallest malaboard in the world, as I call it, because it's basically a bead counter but focused on 108 beads. The normal bead counters have 50 or 100, but that doesn't really help you. Also, if you prepare mala do-it-yourself sets, you will learn that the counting can be very exhausting. And I put the small one away and use the one with the 108 beads. And how I use it, I basically take my beads and pour them over the board. It might look a little bit messy, but it is for a simple reason. I can easily fill the gaps in here and identify also, for example, cracked beads or beads that have a different size. There's also a little control on the bottom here, which goes from 3 to 12 millimeters bead size. And now you know exactly you have 108 beads. So this is the smallest malaboard. Now we have one size bigger, which is a very special one in that case. And as you can tell, this one has also dimensions on it. I don't need them personally, but I have a lot of people asking for them, especially if you do complex designs. It's helpful. You can lay it out and then you have to count still because it's a mala which has 108 beads. But this board is a very special one because I made it accordingly to my Anahata yoga praxis. I'm an Anahata yoga teacher and learned with Peter Clifford, which is an amazing teacher, of course. And the Anahata yoga has one form that's called the 5 elements form. And this is what I try to represent in this board a little bit. So it has the earth on the bottom. And then the next is the water, which has the ability to flow around obstacles. Then you have the center is the Manipura chakra, which is the solar plexus and the fire element. And then you have the air element and the akasha. And you can put kind of like a little intention bead in here if you want. It looks like this, for example. It goes from up to different bigger beads, of course, as well. So this is kind of the second mala board that I have. I like this especially when I don't have much space on my desk, and also a couple people asked me to develop a board that is smaller than the regular one that I introduced first. And this one, just to show you how how it looks like if I put a big 8mm mala in there. It's like this. I mean, this is already knotted, but still you get an impression. And for the mala that we were doing today, I'm going to work with a bigger board. I'm going to show you in a second. So you see there's still plenty of space. And talking about malas, the mala that we're going to do today is similar to the one I just showed you, with the 108 beads in 8mm size. And we're going to have some spacers in between to separate the different sections. We have a guru bead and we have a tassel. Why the 108 beads? That's a different thing I'm going to maybe show in a different video, because that will take too long. But one question that I want to go into is, a lot of people ask me, how am I using my mala? And you can use it in many different ways. Basically, it's made for counting mantras when you're chanting, without actually counting, because you cannot chant and count at the same time. So every time you finish the mantra, you move one beat forward. And some people do it between the first finger and the thumb. Others do it with the first finger and the middle finger. And we tend to do it with the middle finger and the ring finger, just because these two represent Mother Earth and Father Sky. And that's where we place our mala. So there is no real right and wrong way. Especially this mala is, of course, not a traditional mala, because they didn't have any gemstone beads when the yogis used their malas a couple thousand years ago already. So they used the Rudraksha beads. And that's why I think we have some space and freedom to interpret it, this in a more modern way. And to show you a different one, for example, that's one that I like very much, is a mala that is not even recognizable as a mala. I used a tumbled stone as a guru bead. And I have spacers still, yes, but there's no tassel, and you can use it like a double or in a single way. And then there are different malas. For example, you have, I also use pendants, like in this case, it's a bigger pendant. It's a case 2 stone, which I like a lot, but nobody would recognize that this is a mala. And I think that's not important, because you are the one wearing it, and you should be aware of what you're doing there, or you are the one that are being aware of it, and not the others. So, and one of my favorite ones as well, I don't want to hide that from you, is a mala where this is kind of, I call it my nature love mala line, where I use organic castings. These are unique because the original piece will be burned away when the fluid or liquid silver or bronze, for example, replaces it. And that's why these are original pieces. And I always kind of tend to say that the energy of the original piece of nature is still in this metal, because it's poured into it. And this is a shorter one that you can easily wear as a necklace without anybody recognizing that this is a mala. And I knotted it in the back, which is different to the malas with a tassel. And I used some rondelle beads in this case, and you can see they're a little bit glittery, and I like them a lot. So put this back here. And now, since we already had counted our mala beads, I'm going to put this little beading tablet away and introduce you to the third mala board, the biggest one actually. And you recognize it maybe from the other one already. It has a guru notch, I call it. That's what I came up with when I developed the first board, because I wanted to have a place where the guru bead is located. And I also introduced the bracelet groove in the middle, kind of a centered design, and I wanted an extra bracelet grooves on the side and a lot of storage in the middle. This is a cherry wood malaboard, as well as you might remember the ones that I was showing you here. This is cherry wood, the bead counters. They come in different woods, of course. And as you have seen on the smaller one, this was actually oak, waxed oak. And this has the measurements, all the malaboards and all my other bracelet boards as well, can come with dimensions in either inches or centimeters. So let's start with this one. We put out the beads first. I take the outer groove in this case through, just that you see how much space it takes up. And if you're wondering why they're rolling around, there's one simple reason, because I probably haven't set up my table right. And gravity makes the move. So I put all the beads into the outer groove now. Since I already know it's 108, I don't really need to worry much, but I'm going to recount anyways. And the first thing now is I want to place my spacer beads. In this case, I'm going to use some spacer beads, not on every mala I'm doing this, but I like to have like a little separation between the 4 quarters of 27 beads, just because sometimes I prefer only chanting 27 times and not 108. So I'm gonna choose a silver gold-filled guru bead in this case. So this mala has also some metal in it, which I don't mind, but you don't need to do that, of course. You can also do spacers with different materials. You can use wooden beads, Rudraksha beads, all kinds of beads. There is like really endless of options. And I'm gonna count my different sections and place the spacer beads there. So, and no worries, I'm counting in German. It's just my native language. And it's much easier for me, so faster. 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 21, 22, 27. Second one. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 25. I should double check. Maybe I lost some beads or I was miscounting. I see one here. That happened. That's why you recount over and over again. But we still do that anyway. The next step is choosing the string. And I prefer using griffin silk for several reasons. There is one that is natural silk. If you're vegan, there is also a nylon version of the same thing. It pretty much behaves the same. And the result is just nice, soft flow of the beads. It's not like stiff or anything. And these are pretty much pre-stretched as well. They are extra strong in the nylon power case and like more sensitive, of course, if you use 100% silk. So this mala should not get wet and not be pulled at too much because it just will break, and that's a pity. I tend to use nylon for the longer and bigger malas with bigger beads, and for the smaller ones, like for example here, you can see the difference. That's a 6mm bead. I prefer using the natural silk, but if you're vegan, of course, then you might want to use a nylon for all of it. There's also a high performance string from Griffin, but this is more made for natural pearls. And of course, also you can see the difference very well here. This is a number 3 size and a number 8 size. I generally use number 8 because it goes very well with 8mm beads. Most of them have 1mm holes drilled in it. And this still works for 6mm beads. They basically have 1mm, and even if they only have a weight, it works as well because the bead is a little bit stretchy. The string is a little bit stretchy. So I'm gonna use, I think, I'm gonna decide for a white one in this case. Gonna close this, and I show you why I like it so much. I'm opening it. And then you have this little card, and there's already a needle attached. And to get to the needle, the easiest is just pulling off this little piece of cardboard at the bottom, and then you have your needle. You can stretch it or straighten it a little bit with just using your pliers. Use not the tip, a little bit below that, and then take it off the cardboard completely. And the first thing that I always do is making a little knot in the end, for two reasons. The silky thread will open up if I don't do that. This one has kind of, I don't know, they put a little bit of glue on it or so. But it's also for the reason that the beads that you put on there are not slipping off at the other end. That would be a little bit of a Sisyphus game if you put them on there and they slip off there, so you don't want that. I pull all my thread to the right side because I'm right-handed, and I go clockwise through my beads. And since I have a guru bead here and I have a tassel at the bottom, I want the tassel to be mounted to the last part of my string, and I have to go to this guru bead twice. Once on the way to pick up the other beads, and then twice on the back, and that's when I attach the tassel. I know there are many different ways to do this. I prefer stringing first, just for the reason that I'm not gonna mess with my beads. If I have to stop in between, I'm going somewhere, I'm interrupted, and maybe if I have a very complicated pattern, sometimes I make 6mm beads and 8mm beads, and it takes some time to lay it out and play around with the design. And if you get interrupted, you might mess up, and that is really painful when you're almost done with your mala and you realize, oops, there's a bead missing. Happened to me not only once. So now I'm double checking and triple checking if I have all my beads on the string. Then the second reason is, it is, for me at least, much easier to do the knotting in one go. A lot of people just, they string the beads and make a knot, string another bead, make another knot. For me, it doesn't work that way. And when you're doing a lot of malas, and I've done a couple hundred already, and then it's even more important to get efficient doing that. So, yes, it is time consuming to do this because every bead turns in a different direction. And of course you have to look for the hole over and over again. And in this case, the contrast isn't that big between the needle and the actual hole. So you have to turn it and look for it and string it. And then I tend to count again after I'm done with the first section, so that I'm really sure I have all the beads on my string that I want. Check again. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 21, 22, 27. I hope that's fine this time. Also, if you buy beads for your mala, be aware that even with the higher quality beads, there is always one that you might not like, that is cracked, or that has a hole that is not drilled very well and you can't get through, or especially when you make malas that have no tassel and you don't want to have one in the back. There's a technique that makes the mala appear endless, and you need to go through the same hole 2 times with the bead, with the string, and therefore you need big enough holes. And sometimes you just find some beads that don't have that, so you need spare beads, which is always a good thing to have. Also, cracks appear quite often, or quite often, not if you buy high quality beads, but the bead topic itself is a difficult one. I get very often asked, where do you buy your beads? Online? Do you order them here or there? I don't want to even name specific countries, but I tend to buy them with local dealers only by now, because the quality just changes so much. When you buy a bead from a bigger seller and you think, oh, that was a nice bead, and the next time you want to buy the same bead again, the quality can be very different. And then the size doesn't match anymore, the holes don't match anymore, the color doesn't match. So always buy, at least for the 8mm beads, you need 3 strings of beads for your mala, because there's basically 52 beads or something on there, which only makes 104, unfortunately, and not 108. But the good thing is, if you buy 3, you normally have some leftovers and can make a matching bracelet out of it, which I like. And also, if these are not the highest quality beads, you have enough spare. And some beads are just also very brittle, and then more cracks appear, and you are happy, oops, when you have the spares. So 3rd quarter done, double checking again and again and again. Should put the darker bead on there afterwards. 2, 4, 6, 2, 4, 6, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 27. Put it on again. Oops. Double checking. 27. I know some people call me crazy that I'm counting like 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times. It's just the pain of having a finished mala which misses a bead. It just sucks. So I'd rather check more often than necessary, and still it happens. Still, I don't know why. It's just a distraction. Maybe I really should chant while nodding or beading. Maybe that helps with my focus, but I can't guarantee that either. So, so we're almost there. Don't worry if you need longer, especially later when it comes to the nodding. I don't expect anybody who's seeing this video trying to learn to be that fast with nodding, as I am probably. And I can tell you the first mala that I ever did took me probably 5 hours for knotting it, because I did use the wrong technique and I got so frustrated and did it over and over again and had to unknot and try again. And I really wasn't convinced if I ever would do that again. Now we're done with our 4th quarter. Of course, there is no other marker bead afterwards, but I'm going to double check the amount of beads. 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. 10, 12, 14, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 27. So now we have one side with a guru bead, 4 quarters, 4 times 27 beads, 3 spacer beads. And now, as I told you before, we have to go through the guru bead once more. No, we don't. Because first comes the knotting. first we're gonna knot, and then in the end, because if I would do that now, go through here, you would end up with an unknotted mala, which would be like this. It looks nice, but it gives you no space to move the beads. And also, if this would break, the beads would go everywhere. But you need two open ends, actually, or one end that we're working on, to do the knots, and that's what I'm gonna show you in the next step. So I'm gonna move from the malaboard on a beading board now, just for the reason that this will have a lot of clicking sound when I do the knotting on here. It's much more comfortable to have something soft underneath. And I'm gonna put this away and move to the beading tablet, as I call it. You can use it this way or that way. I turn it around 90 degrees to have a nice area to work on. And I put my prepared mala on here. And now we have two ends. We have one end that has a knot that we had at the beginning. And we have another end that has the needle attached, which we still will need in the end, because we have to go through the guru bead a second time, and it's much easier with this needle. But so that we don't lose the beads that we already have put on there, I just take this, twist it, and make it like a teardrop shape and turn it around a couple times so that it's secured, but it's not messed up in the way that I can pull it apart again, straighten it up, and go through my beads again. I put this on the left. I can either put it on the board. I tend to have it hanging out a little bit, just that I have enough space. And on the right side, now we have to think about that there will be a tassel that we want to attach in the end. And we have to have this somehow knotted together so that it has something to attach the tassel on. And what I normally do is, like, this is about, let's say 12 centimeters. That should work. I make a knot, just a single, I think it's called overhand knot. That's where my guru bead goes. And I do, in this case, it has quite a big hole. I can just also do something like this, that you can pull open again. You don't necessarily need this knot here, which I can remove. It gives you some more freedom in the end if you decide to move the guru bead a little bit. And you can see I'm knotting. It is quite simple with this string, especially if you haven't pulled it too tight yet. It is a little bit more tricky with the nylon than with the silk. If you have a silk knot that you want to open again, that might happen later, we'll see. It sometimes helps if you kind of wiggle it a little bit around. So what I'm going to start with is the first knot where the first bead is going to sit. It does not necessarily be is the knot where the guru bead will sit on, because I now have an open situation here that I can still move it around a little bit. But important, if you have 2 meters of string and 108 beads, you don't want to waste your string. That means be conscious about how much you have here and string them pretty tight. So now the big miracle starts. How do we make a knot into a mala and move one bead after another? What I do is I knot from the left to the right side. I have all the unknotted beads on the left and the guru and the first bead on the right. This is where my first knot's going to go, on top of this one bead. And for doing that, you need a little bit of string to be able to work with. It's different from person to person. And this is the trickiest part in the beginning, and I will repeat it a couple times before I go on my natural kind of knotting speed. But there are several stages. You want to hold on to this bead because you can pull it a little bit and gives the string some tension. What I tend to do is I use these 3 fingers. It's like these 3 fingers here. It's the first finger and the thumb where I hold my bead with, and I might have to look at this camera as well so that you can see it from the top. Then I use the middle finger and build kind of a triangle. The middle finger is the one I'm going to wrap around the bead. And then I'm going back to the situation where I have first finger and thumb, and you can see it kind of hanging here. And now if I look from above, it opens up like a triangle, and I can open it a little bit more because here through this loop you want to go through with your bead. Forget the guru bead, it's kind of irritating that it hangs here. We're focusing on this one bead here. And now it kind of dangles, and don't get confused by things hanging and dangling around. What you want to do is go through the same opening that you put your bead through with your tweezers and grab, can you see that from the camera above? Grab the bead right on top of it with your tweezers, with the top of your tweezers. Once you have that, you can let go of the rest. And you have a little, like a loop here, but as you can see, nothing really happens because you're holding it. And now this loop, you pull tight, very softly to your bead. Go down on the beading tablet for one reason. If this is very light now, there's only one bead hanging on there. But if you have like 107 hanging there, they have a certain weight and they will pull it down. The tweezers might slip off. You have a knot that you have to undo, or the distance is too big. So what I'm going to do is I go down to the beading tablet, use my thumbnail, gently pull the tweezers out, and at the same time moving the knot close to the bead by pushing it with my thumbnail. So in this next stage of kind of securing this knot, I'm going to take my tweezers again a little bit further below the top because I have a better grip. And I kind of gently but firmly pull it towards the bead. And that's how you secure the knot and tighten it. And then I'm going to explain again because it's kind of tricky. I take the next bead, pull it to the right side. And by doing this, I'm going to do it slowly again. You also, it's kind of like the third step of securing and tightening this little knot. Again, holding the string between the first finger and the thumb, opening up the middle finger, kind of wrapping around that. And then you realize after a while, okay, it's not enough string or it needs a little bit more, and you can either adjust by opening the finger or letting, do it again, the string slip through your fingers by loosening your grip here. Because you need a little bit of space to get this bead through there. So again, pushing it through. Watch your guru bead because it might get kind of tangled there. Grab through it, the same hole. I'm doing it again, you see, opening up. And you move your fingers, you move your hand, and so that you are able to grab the string right above the bead. Once you have it, you can let go, nothing will happen. slowly pulling it closer, go down to the beading tablet so that it doesn't pull. Move it close with your thumbnail, tighten it with the tweezers, and there you go. This looks very nice, very tight now, very close. That's how it's supposed to be, because after time, or with time, when you use your mala, it will soften a little bit and stretch out. So, third bead, same thing. Oops, pulling it close. It's kind of like the third step to tighten the knot. Open, like again, these three. Thumb, first finger, grab, kind of adjust to the right length that you need. Open this with the middle finger, having the triangle you see from the top now, going in between, and then pushing it through this so that it hangs. And you can go with your tweezers through the same opening, grab it, hold it, and nothing can happen. Go down on the tablet, pushing it. I use, of course, first finger and thumb. It's not only the thumb. I just realized. Securing with your tweezers, and that's it. Taking the second or the fourth already. And of course, you can put your tweezers away every time, but after a while, when you get faster, you just keep it in your hands, and it's very natural. So I do it a couple times. This is pretty much the speed that I'm normally going. And also it helps when you go down and kind of poke with your tweezers into the beading tablet. That's the nice thing about the felt. You can just poke into it and secure your mala with that as well. Watch your guru bead. It might be a little bit, it seems maybe annoying to have the guru bead and the end dangling around, but for me, I realize it's the best way to do it. You get used to it, and this will get longer, and then I show you how you fast and easy can get your beads through this. Oops. Sometimes I use obviously one more finger, but I will show it to you again in a moment when you see that there are more and more beads. For me, this last step is really important. You can skip it, but that leads to not that tight knots actually, because this gives you the best control with the tweezers. You have, of course, to be a little bit more careful if you use silk. It's not that it's more slow or different, it's just you have to be a little bit more gentle. Some people tend to, I see that in my classes or my courses a lot, they tend to really tighten the knot. And I'm like, be gentle, but still firm, because you don't want to break your mala when making it already. It might break one day, but it's not meant to break already when you're actually still working on it. So as you can see, it is getting faster, and you know after a while how much string you will need. And you can always adjust with several things. You see, I tend to even use 3 fingers here on that side at the moment, but this is just a habit probably. Maybe I also started doing it without realizing, oh no, I wasn't paying attention. And what happened? I had a bead. No, I had no bead, but a knot already. So make sure you're aware of what you're doing and always think of your bead. Pull it to the last knot, open up, adjust the string that you need, go from the top. And now it's getting interesting after a while, because a lot of people try doing this. They kind of like, how do I get this through there? it's getting really complicated when the mala is getting longer. So I show you in a second a way that is much more efficient. So going on with the knots, we need a bead, pull it to the right, open up, pulling the bead through, and going down there, pulling it tight, next bead. And I'm gonna do a couple of these now so that you can see how it looks like when we have more beads on the right side. Oops. And if you slip off, this is what happens. It's nothing critical because you still hold it with your tweezers. And you just readjust. Don't let go of the tweezers before you really are comfortable. Down here, poke it into the felt. Push the next bead against it. And as you realize, again, I said that before, when I'm in the flow, I'm using more than the 3 fingers. Just because it gives me more flexibility in adjusting faster to my bead strengths, bead lengths. Because as you realize it well, the distance already got shorter between the beads on the left and the beads on the right. Because I haven't gotten more beads pulled closer to me, but I will do that in a second. Oops. Again. Nothing's happening as long as you hold on to the string with the tweezers. So you have full control. You see, it's already getting longer. And because this is a nylon, you can stretch it a little bit because it's a little bit more stiff than the silk in the beginning. And now I just get the next kind of amount of beads on the board. Still need some space here. And you will figure out after a while. It's always this balance of like having enough string, having enough beads close by, and taking the next bead to the right, pulling it through. Again, the loop was too big, so it slipped over the next bead. Nothing tragic. And now I think in a moment I will explain the additional finger that I'm obviously using. Now we have the first section done. We have the spacer. I still do a knot before and after the spacer bead. Depends on the spacer, what kind of, or if you want more knots or not. And as you can tell already, it's getting longer and longer on the right side. And you also hear that the sound on the felt is not very loud. It's nice and not clicking on the board, which can be very annoying if you do the actual knotting on your malaboard or beading board. I still haven't looked at the time, so I have no idea how long it actually takes. But please don't worry if you need longer than me. For sure, this is not my first mala that I'm doing. And actually, doing this very slowly and conscious, it is very relaxing thing to do. Also make sure in between that you're not stiffening up in your shoulders. I know some colleagues that just mentioned something to me like that the other day, that they had a stiff shoulder after doing their second mala. And make sure you are loose in your shoulders and don't tighten up there, otherwise it will be not very comfortable the next day. And another thing is, take care of your fingers. If you, I mean, I prefer not taping my fingers, for example, at least if I'm not doing 20 malas in a row, because after a while, you can see here already, it's getting kind of red. And if you really pull it tight, you might end up with some blisters. And there are several things, materials that you can tape your fingers with, but it needs to be kind of soft enough that it's not kind of catching your thread, and also slippery enough that it easily goes over the finger. So maybe now is a good time where I can explain the additional finger technique again. Do one more knot. First the bead. You remember the triangle? That's how I tend to explain it in the beginning, because this is just the easiest way to do. But the longer this gets, the more beads I have to get through this. So I tend to use another fingers, like I use 4 fingers, just because it's easier to have a bigger opening. You see, if I only use 2, I have this. I need to adjust. I can do this as well and just start with the first bead, pulling that through, and it slips very easily about that finger, and it still has the tendency to get stuck. But if you do this fast and a lot, then you just start using another finger, because it gives you a wider opening and it just slips through it very easily. And you, on the way, can adjust with your fingers the opening and where the thread is actually going. So as you can tell by now, we are on the 3rd section, and in between we're just gonna speed up the video a little bit so that you don't get bored. And you can always, of course, just stop the video, make your knots in the time that you are comfortable with, and then we'll see us again in the end of the 108 beads when it comes to the tassel. So you can see, because there is this little stopper in the end, the beads are not slipping from the thread. And also what you can see, and I really hope it works out. Yeah, it should. It's always a thing when I give classes and someone says, I only have that much string left, but still so many beads. What do I do? So far we managed to finish every mala, but some of them were really, really tight to finish in the end because they ran out of string. Now we have done our beads successfully, and now we can untangle this. and open up our needle again, which I twisted to this little loop before. I can either pull or just wind it, and can use my tweezers again to straighten it. Just hold on, pull it through the top, straighten it with your fingers. And now we're gonna go through the guru bead again. That's why we haven't had a knot before, because it's a bit easier to move it around. And we can just go straight through, have it as straight as possible in this case, because it's a big bead and it's hollow, so there is no guidance for the actual needle. I have to poke it a little bit around here. Patience. There we go. So, as you can see, I still have quite a bit of a string left over, because I know how to knot very tight. A lot of people don't have that much, so be aware. Now what I'm going to do is just having a simple knot like this, using my tweezers again the same way as we used it all the time, to get this tight to the guru bead and that it doesn't slip. Oops. Pull it close. And here. So next part is the tassel. What I'm using, in this case I'm gonna decide for the white one. I could do a contrasting color, of course, but I'm also using the Griffin silk. In this case it's 0.38 millimeter, which is thinner than the thread that we are beading with, just for the reason that it's a bit more fluent and soft. And in this case also it is real silk, even though I was knotting this one with nylon. For vegans, again, you can get this in nylon as well, and you don't need to use the real silk for that. But this is a nice and soft, thin material for the tassel. What I'm going to use is a little tassel card. That's what I give away with mala kits as well. This can come in different lengths. If you have a mala that is supposed to have a longer tassel, like this one, for example, you would have a bigger card to wrap your thread around. And if you have one like this, I haven't shown you that before, this is approximately the length that we have here, maybe a little bit longer. And you decide on how long you want to have your tassel, how big. So I sometimes even put this in a little bowl, so that's easier to spin, because I start with having the thread hanging down here. Or maybe I should put that on the right side so that I'm not gonna tangled up. And then I like to use 108 turns, just because it's a sacred 108 and it gives a nice soft tassel. As I said, it's nice when you have it spinning in a bowl, then you don't have to stop. So, as you can see, I wasn't really super focused. If you pull a little bit too strong, it gets bent, and that also means the tassel gets shorter. So try to keep this straight, or use a bigger card from the beginning. That helps as well. And now I'm gonna cut this off, just a snip. One recommendation, have these as far away from your mala as possible. I always say when I have a class, no scissors close to any kind of thread, because this is the worst that can happen if it accidentally is close to your mala and the thread slips into it and it's cut before it's even finished. That would be really painful. So what I'm gonna do now is lay my tassel card in front of me, and these two ends that we have here shall kind of embrace the tassel. First thing is I'm gonna cut off the thread, the kind of needle, because it will just give me trouble. I secure the end because the nylon tends to untangle, and make a little knot in there. You can see it immediately goes like this. Fuzzy stuff. And now I'm gonna take the longer, just because it's easier, it's no specific reason, pull it underneath here and have my guru bead placed inside the tassel, because in the end we're gonna cut it open here and kind of wrap it around, and this way the knot goes inside. If I would put the guru bead on the outside, I would have to kind of fiddle around and put it inside. So I always start with going over the one thread, pulling it close, and now what happens is, as you can see, it opens up. Because the nylon is very slippery and it doesn't really give me a grip, even though there's no danger that I pull it, that I can rip it apart here because it's nylon. What I'm doing is, where is my other little water bowl? I don't know. I'm gonna take the big one here. I had a smaller one as well. It's gone. I'm gonna make it wet. Doesn't matter if it goes on the felt and the tassel card. It might be ruined in the end, but you can throw it out. And what it does is it gives it much more thread and grip, and it holds it better together. So since we went that way in the beginning, do it the other way, and one more the other way, so that it holds secure. What I always have close by is it's actually an egg holder with pre-cut pieces of tissue or paper, and soak off the excess water. And what I'm also gonna do is, it's not really necessary, but I like to give it a little tiny tip of glue, and that's also very helpful if you have these around, because they help you to not mess around. And this is actually also the Griffin bead cord glue, for one reason. You can take super glue, any other kind of glue. There are many kinds of glues, of course, but I prefer this because it's still flexible when it's hardened out, and it won't get brittle, and it doesn't damage your cord. So any excess glue, I just soak it off a little bit, put this away, and now I can remove. Actually, I'm gonna put one finger inside. I can remove the card. It got a little bit wet, doesn't matter. And you can easily identify the strings that are coming from your mala because they're a little bit thicker. And I'm gonna pull them inside and turn the whole tassel so that I'm gonna hide the knots inside. And now I'm gonna miss my scissors. These are just regular scissors to cut cloth fabric with, not cloth fabric. They're very sharp, and you can easily go in here, still hold that tight, hold it up straight, cut through, check if you got all the strings, and you're gonna straighten it out later on, so don't worry. You can, of course, always leave it like that, but as I said, scissors away. So now we have some leftovers here, and again I will just cut off the long ones here that I don't need anymore. Anyway, so coming to the pretty much almost the last step. We have all the thread from the tassel hanging in here now. They're kind of secure, but we want to give it a nice and tight wrap. Since this is silk, and I mentioned it before, it's slippery, what I really like to do is give it a little bath, just for the reason that I'm soaking it and it has more grip in the end. What you can also do, I like using these little brushes. And now you see, I forgot one thread. Open it. To have it nice straight. And now comes my special technique to wrap it. What we need is a piece of thread to wrap it around, and I'm gonna use the same as I use for the tassel. Can also use a thicker one. In this case, I just use this, and it's about, I would say, 1 meter, 3 feet, something like that. Hope I didn't mess this up. Measurements. And what I want to do is holding it in a way like this later. I'm gonna use a little helper for that and wrap it that way. And to have that fixed and not slipping away, I'm gonna use a little wooden block. Just go with a pin through here, fix it, and again, since this is silk, I'm gonna use some water. Using this, pulling it through the water just that it's nice and wet to have a certain grip that I need, and put it underneath my my tassel. Once it's there, I can still, if I want to, brush it a little bit again, have it look nice, and straighten it out. And then, no, it slipped. Making the first knot. Doesn't matter when it moves back and forth. Once you have it pulled through, you can adjust and position it. I like to have this in a little round shape. And now I'm gonna readjust my needle, or maybe even take it out. It's however you feel comfortable with it. There is no need to have it attached to the wood. I learned that it helps a lot of people, but also I tend to get rid of it after a while, because if I use the silk and make it wet, it's really nice and has a nice grip to work with, so I don't need to worry anymore. But I want to have it in order at the beginning. So since we're using, or actually I'm in this case using the silk for the tassel, I have to be more careful now when I tighten the knots, because it totally is a different thing when it comes to wet silk compared to the nylon that we used for the knotting. It is much easier to rip it apart, especially wet silk is less strong than dry silk. I think it's the opposite with cotton. If you imagine wet jeans, I think it's more resistible to pull and than a dry one, and with silk it's the opposite. So now we have two different lengths, which is fine, because one of them I'm gonna use to wrap around, and you can do it kind of like however you want. I like to do it nicely in order and one row after the other. So I'm gonna take this short one and add it to my tassel and kind of hold it tight together, as you can see here. And now I'm gonna take some more water so that it's really having a good, nice grip. Don't worry if it drips on your felt, it doesn't matter. This is PET felt, it's vegan. And now I start wrapping around my tassel. And with every turn, I try to get it as close to the one before. Get the next one. And you can repeat it as often as you want. If it's too slippery, if it walks off. Hold it with your thumbnail, fingers. This is easier if you use a bigger thread. I kind of like it that way. You can also always use your thumbnail to shift it, to push it closer together. And the fill's not really holding on, just make it wet. Works with the nylon thread as well, but just not as good because this is not taking in the water as much as the soap does. And of course it also works similar if you use Athlon cord. That works with water as well to straighten it and have it work for you. So. Once you feel that's enough, or as you like it, you look for the one for the other end, basically, that you had added to your tassel before, and try to get the other ones out of the way. Since this is longer, you will identify it. And you should end with the one that you wrap around close to the one that is running underneath your wraps, basically. And now, of course, it helps if it would be still attached to the wood. And you can do that again if you want. If you feel more comfortable with it. Just take your pin, go through the tassel. Oops. Depends on what part of the wood you hit. Try to not catch a thread and pull it apart. So now you can comfortably make your knot to tighten it. Put a little bit of water on there. Go the other way. And maybe do one more. Again, the other direction, so that this knot really holds on and doesn't open up again. And in this case, since I used the same thickness of thread as I used for the tassel, I'm pretty much gonna leave it like this. I might even do one more knot just in case, and might even put a tiny little bit of glue on there. It's probably not necessary, but I like to go safe with that one. And you can again use a little piece of paper to make sure you don't have too much. Just do a tiny little spot here. It will dry after a while. It doesn't need to be dry immediately. Take off the excess glue so that it doesn't have a blob on there, and then free your mala, the tassel. And now you can decide how long and how straight you want these to have. You can either just cut it roughly, like I do like this, or if you want this to be cut quite nicely, turn it around. So pretty much like a hairdresser is doing it. Pull it through your fingers, double check that you have all of them and that they are straight. That's why it's really important to have sharp scissors. Do it once more. Turn them around. finish it. Put the scissors away again. And if you have all these little thingies on your beading tablet now, just vacuum them off or use this little lint brush, which works well. There are many ways to get rid of that. And you're done. That is the mala with the tassel. As I said, you can add beads to the strings when you wrap this around, or use a different color, use a different kind of thread. Some people use little strips of old sari silk, for example, which is very nice. And then you're ready to wear your mala. And this is like the typical length. I don't know if it's still visible. Of the 108 beads. This is, for some people like to wear it double. For me, I'm 6 feet tall. It's the right size, the right length. And depending on how big your arms are, you can do it like this, or I'll do it once again. Now I'm tangled up, of course. You start with that, and you easily see, is there more? You could just turn it, twist it, to shorten it a little bit, and then go, one more, and go over your wrist. And you can put the tassel like this. But be aware, if this is silk, be careful. Treat it with love. So I hope you really enjoyed making your first own mala today and this tutorial, that it helped you to learn how to do it, especially the knots and the tassel, which I know a lot of people struggle with. And you can be proud to have your own first mala done, and wish you a nice time with your meditations.